When I made my video on the Soviet KV-1 heavy tank, some people were surprised to learn it wasn't very good. I didn't mince words about it, making its general unreliability and strategic downfalls very clear. Some think I was perhaps a bit too harsh, so I figured I would talk about a Soviet heavy tank that was quite good, the IS-2. It's actually pretty funny, because a lot of people assume it was like the Tiger II, excessive, a maintenance burden, unreliable, and just ineffective overall. You may be surprised to learn it, but that wasn't actually the case. To see how the IS-2 really performed, let's start from the beginning. The IS-2's beginning starts with the end of the KV-1. By late 1942, the common opinion in the Soviet military was that the KV-1 had to go. Compared to the medium T-34, it had no firepower advantage, was limited by both mobility and weight, and was much less reliable. With the tide of the war turning in their favor, they needed a more practically designed heavy breakthrough tank. A new tank called KV-13 was developed as part of this effort. It was hoped that it would not only be lighter than the KV-1, but that it would also withstand 88mm hits. Unfortunately, it had the same issue the KV-1 had, a very bad transmission. The crew conditions also weren't great. As such, it was quickly cancelled. As a stopgap measure, the KV-1's armor was shaved down, and an improved transmission was fitted. The result was the KV-1S, which to be fair was a large improvement, though it still wasn't quite good enough. When the Soviets captured examples of the Tiger and Panther, it became clear they had some catching up to do. Work began on yet another tank, this time called Object 273. It wouldn't be called KV though. Since the beginning of the war, Klement Vorshilov was no longer well liked, mostly due to how he handled the early war situation. New heavy tanks would be named after Joseph Stalin, being named IS or JS. It would use the basic hull shape of the KV-13, but with a refined transmission and one less crew member. In firing tests against Germany's newest tanks, two cannons had the best results, the 85mm and 122mm, so they were selected as possible weapons. Both 85 and 122 variants, Object 273 and 240 respectively, would be produced, being called IS-1 and IS-2. After some more testing and combat use, it was shown that the 122 was far better than the 85. Not only was it better for dealing with fortifications and infantry, the tank's primary targets, but the anti-armor effect was great as well. During testing, it not only went through the Panther's upper front plate, but the rest of the tank too, exiting out the rear. The 85 couldn't even come close. As such, only around 200 IS-1s were produced, with most of them being rebuilt in IS-2s. For comparison, nearly 4,000 IS-2s were produced in total. They both began production in January of 1944. IS-2s first saw combat in April of that same year. In these initial engagements, their performance was relatively lackluster, though that's mostly because the crews were inexperienced. At the very least, their armor proved to be very effective, before they were knocked out of course. More experienced tankers had quite a lot of praise for it, asking for production to be ramped up as soon as possible. It saw more auspicious use during Operation Bagration, one of the more successful Soviet operations of the war. As a heavy breakthrough tank, the IS-2 is very effective. They were deployed in relatively small and independent units, easily punching through heavy German defenses. Compared to the KV-1, the IS-2 was only slightly heavier, but had much better armor and firepower. It was pretty reliable for a heavy tank, especially one from World War II, lasting over 1,100 kilometers on average. With this dependability, it could get to where it was needed with little trouble, unlike similar breakthrough designs. There were some slight issues with the suspension during development, but they were ironed out before production. While the 122 was better than the 85 at anti-tank work, it still wasn't great at it. The rate of fire for the gun was quite bad, mainly due to shell size and cramped conditions. The tank also only carried 8 AP rounds, so long engagements against other tanks wasn't ideal. Luckily for the IS-2, if it did manage to score a hit, there was a very good chance it didn't need another. It was also quite fortunate that when deploying IS-2s, they specifically looked for areas with little German armor. It did have a few other issues, namely poor visibility and a conspicuous cannon. In 1945, the IS-3 technically replaced it, but the IS-3 was much worse, being plagued with a lot of serious issues. In summary, the IS-2 is a very well-designed tank. Compared to the KV-1, it was a vast improvement, and one of the few reliable heavy tanks used during the war. It certainly had shortcomings, especially in the AT department, but thanks to the way it was deployed, these issues were minimized. Frankly, I think it doesn't get enough praise. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.